Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al, DraftKings Week 9. I've got an NFL DFS first look that I have to take for you on this slate once again. Every single week, every single Monday, we go on DraftKings and we kind of take a look at some core plays without a ton of research, right? There's no optimizers that have projections out yet. I don't have anything done for this slate. We haven't really dug into what possible injuries there are. We don't know weather. We don't know anything that's going to formulate our final decisions, but this is a process-based look at building some of the core players that we're looking at based on the things that we do know. We know which players get specific amount of volume or project to get a specific amount of volume. We know who look like mispriced players at their price. We have our 5-box running backs that we try to attack every single week. We're trying to get a lot of looks at 20 plus touch running backs who are involved in their passing game, maybe favored at home. All those sorts of things are the way that we go about building this. We typically try to pay down at quarterback, although this year on DraftKings it's a little bit tougher as they've priced the quarterbacks way more appropriately than they have in years past. We have a very interesting defense priced on this slate and everything else that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But there is something that I did want to mention to you guys beforehand, before we get into this. Every week, I basically repeat a lot of the same instructions, basic framework to build your lineups. Like if you're building tournament lineups, that you should be stacking a quarterback with one or two of their pass catchers. You should be bringing that primary stack back with an opposing player on the other team. You should also build a secondary correlation into those lineups so that you have a secondary stack of players that you can then use that are correlated with one another. Because if you're going to try and hit a 9-team parlay, it's easier to have to hit 3-4 things than it is to hit all 9. Well, another member of the Smiz gang has taken down the millionaire maker. Gaza, yesterday in week 8, G. Hartman 314, Mahomes, Robinson and Kelsey, brought it back with Mims, DK Metcalf to Kendrick Bourne as a secondary stack, Henry and Cook, two high volume running backs, and the Dolphins defense to make it all fit. He came in number 1, 244.04 points. Congratulations to him for taking down $1 million on DraftKings. Our second member of the Smiz gang in the last 2 years, joining Sonic Librarian last year, taking down the millionaire maker. Gaza, congratulations to you. Amazing lineup on a very tough week in week 8. So let's take a look in week 9 and see what we can do. As always, Patrick Mahomes is and should be at or near the top of all the quarterback pricing. Facing off against Carolina, they are going to be massively favored in this game, just like they were last week. 12.5-point favorites with a total of 51 points expected in this game. We talked about how Mahomes was going to have to be extremely efficient, and he was. 5 touchdowns on 31 completions is absolutely insane. 39 DraftKings points last week. There's always paths to stacking Patrick Mahomes with his pass catches. We kind of know where the ball is going to go most weeks, especially once players start getting injured. Once we saw Sammy Watkins go down, we know that Robinson plays directly behind him. They did get the ball to Mecole Hardman yesterday, but the majority of the targets went to Tyreek Hill, who caught 2, Kelsey, who did his job, Robinson catching a late one. You know who you can stack him with. Kyler Murray, same sort of idea, 7,800. He's doing work. He's basically doing what Lamar Jackson did last season in 2019 here in 2020, with the amount of activity that he's got with his legs, giving him a tremendous floor and also tremendous upside with his legs, with the amount of rushing touchdowns that he's gotten, essentially an average of 1 a week. But it's the rushing attempts and yards that are something that I think are most repeatable. The rushing touchdowns are going to be highly variant, as you're seeing this year with Lamar Jackson not running for as many touchdowns as he did last year. You can't predict the touchdowns. We can predict the volume. And though his volume may be a little bit down in terms of rushing attempts from where it was last year, it still projects to be the second highest, if there weren't guys like Kyler Murray, projects to be the second highest rush attempt total on a season is Lamar Jackson this year in 2020. And he set the record last year. Kyler Murray may break that. And again, we're getting 6.7 DraftKings points, 7.4, 31, 7.8. You add in the touchdown equity on top of it, and the fact that in 3 of the last 4 weeks, he's thrown for multiple touchdowns. as this offense is starting to kind of feel itself, then we possibly have a situation where we could have a ceiling game. And with Kenyon Drake out, we also have a little bit of extra play with Chase Edmonds, knowing that their running backs are going to be a little bit more truncated. But I don't know that we can afford these guys in the lineup that I want to build this week. Looking at a couple of cheap guys. If you want to go with Phillip Rivers, fine. If you think Tags is going to be the man, if you think it's Tua time, go with him. But I can't buy in just yet. Although this is a situation where they're playing on the road against Arizona. I think he's fine for tournaments, but not somebody I want to really hang my hat on in cash games. I think they're going to lean more heavily on short passing. They're not going to take the shots downfield. They're going to manage the clock a little bit more. They want to see what they have with him, but he's not going to play as free and as fast and as loose as Fitz did, at least not from what I saw against a very tough defense last week with the Rams. Derek Carr against the Chargers. I don't hate this play, and we should not have the weather and wind situations that we had last week. Derek Carr has been very, very good outside of that wind situation where they ran the ball like a million times last week, even though they ran 70 plus plays against the Cleveland Browns. Derek Carr, we know who we can stack him with. Very easy to stack him with Waller. If you want to take tournament shots with Ruggs or Aguilar, I'm fine with that as well. Or if you really want to get frisky and go with Renfro, I'm okay with him for tournaments, but I don't know if I'm comfortable yet, at least not at this point in the week with cash. Mid 6Ks are a little bit muddled. Bunch of guys that don't really have consistent access to a 30 plus point DraftKings day, but also shouldn't get you less than 12 points. So like they're nice, but they're not thrilling. Guys like Stafford, who, you know, kind of sits here between like, you know, 17 and 24 points most weeks, which is, it's nice, it's fine, but like there's no real ceiling attached to those guys. Roethlisberger, same sort of thing, 15, 21, 19. Like they're kind of like safe, but they're safe and they cost you a bunch. Like this is what I said. They've been very aggressive with pricing the quarterbacks. Tannehill going up against Chicago, who's an extremely tough defense as well. I think we kind of have to look up into this range, at least this early in the week. We have Lamar Jackson at a very, very cheap price in a game against Indy on the road. Defenses matter, but like Lamar Jackson is a unique kind of cat. He's just a different kind of breed. And though he has not been anywhere close to as efficient as he was last year, he still has 30 to 35 point upside, but his floor has been way more in play this year with, you know, 4 games under 20 fantasy points. And last year, I don't think he even had one of those type of games, as this offense operated way more efficiently in 2019 as it is in 2020, which is something we projected before the season. He was not going to be able to sustain a 10% touchdown pass percentage rate. It's just, you know, 10% of your attempts are not going to turn into touchdowns. It's just never going to happen outside of maybe a 1-year sample size. But even if he came back to like 5 or 6%, he'd still be an all-time great. That's kind of where he's sitting this year. We would like to see him get into the end zone a little bit more with as much as he rushes it. He did have one called back this week where he got in and then it got called back. So at least we know that he is getting the amount of rushing attempts, which is giving us the good floor, and a ceiling game is coming for him. It's just not as predictable as it was last year. And Deshaun Watson kind of feels like the safer floor plus ceiling play. A very similar play here. And against the team that we've been streaming quarterbacks against all season long. 7,100 for Deshaun Watson kind of feels like a place where I want to sit a lot this week, both in cash and in tournaments, and we can get there. Multiple touchdowns in every game since week 3. Tough matchups against Kansas City in Kansas City, Baltimore and Pittsburgh. The schedule really opened up going to playing Minnesota, playing Jacksonville, at Tennessee, at Green Bay. Tennessee is a good defense, but a pass funnel. He put up 35 against them. And at Jacksonville, that defense is really struggling against pretty much every opponent that they play. And they're having quarterback troubles with turnovers and moving the ball. So there's a lot of short field opportunities here for Deshaun Watson against a defense that's outmanned, which makes me want to play him. And then I think that there is a possibility here for some value if we stack him. Not something you need to do in cash, but I think that it's just a really good play. Will Fuller at 6,800 is solid. Right? He's been good all season long. You know, 1 game under double-digit fantasy points. We know about his ceiling. We have a really good floor of targets with him. And now that they've gotten Brandon Cooks back involved in the passing game, getting 9, 9, and 12, 30 targets over the past 3 games. If he sustains this level of usage, 5,500 is just kind of too cheap for that price, especially with the upside that the matchup brings. So I'm going to plug him first, and then we'll talk about the running backs. So I think that's the first play that I kind of want to make there to make this fit. Y'all know who the cover boy is, so obviously Dalvin Cook's going to be involved. It's not because he had a 50-plus point fantasy day last week. It's because he is clearly a 5-box running back against a defense in Detroit that gives up yards to opposing running backs in chunks. He's at home. They're favored. The game does have a high total. He is involved in their passing game, gets 100% of the inside the 5 carries, leads the league, or at least led the league before his injury in terms of rushing touchdowns, had 3 more this week, so took the lead back from everybody else. Good chance at a 100-yard game here for him. Great chance at 20 touches and all the touchdown equity that comes along with as many inside the 5 touches as he gets. They don't have very many weapons on Minnesota, but they go to the 2 of them very, very often between Cook and Thielen. So we're going to fit him in at 8,200 again. Anytime we get a situation like this where the running backs aren't being priced up aggressively, I think that we need to take advantage in our cash games. Christian McCaffrey may be back this week. He may not. We don't know. We'll see. They're hopeful that he can return. We'll monitor this throughout the week. 8,500 against Kansas City. You know that there's going to be passing opportunities in this game. And Kansas City's defense should be one that gives up points, theoretically, even though recently they've been very stingy, but they've played really bad opponents recently, which has held things down. I think that this Carolina offense, with as differentiated as it is, with guys like Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore and hopefully Christian McCaffrey back, might lead to something different, but we'll have to see how involved Mike Davis is. And at 8,500, I'm more confident in Dalvin Cook at his price. I didn't do this meaning to have a bring back play for that primary stack that I had, but here we are with James Robinson at only 7K. I think he's quite good and Houston is quite bad. This is a great matchup where they're at home in a high totaled game. He's very involved in the passing game. And if we have a situation again where Chris Thompson is out, I think that James Robinson should get a ton of looks in the passing game like he did last week with 6 targets, giving him a really solid floor. And he's actually quite good. The coaching staff did a great job of hiding him from us in the preseason. He looks very, very good. And has had the job all throughout. Looking at some other running backs that we can maybe hang our hat on as a flex. Talked about Mike Davis. Chase Edmonds at 6,800. If you want to go with him against Miami instead of James Robinson, I'm fine with that. With Drake out, he could theoretically see 20 touches, though we don't know. Right now, I prefer on Monday, okay? I prefer Robinson based on both the matchup and knowing what his volume is going to be. To Chase Edmonds. We don't know if they're going to work in Eno at all with Arizona. So I'm hoping that Edmonds gets 20 touches, but I'm not assured that he's going to get 20 touches, though I think it is viable that he could. And maybe down the stretch, he has the same impact in 2020 that Kenyon Drake had in 2019 for this Cardinals offense, where he is the do everything, involved in the passing game, gets a bunch of touchdowns, scores from deep. He's looked really good every time he's touched the ball this year. It was a matter of, when and not if, that I think that he was going to take the job from Drake once, like we've seen like a month of football, that he was clearly the better back. And now this injury has kind of forced Cliff's hands where Chase is now the guy. I think he's certainly in play this week. Again, a home favored running back in a very fast paced game who is involved in the passing game. But again, he's likely to get vultured around the goal line by Kyler, and there are other bigger backs on the team that they may go to inside the 5 as well. So there's just more question marks for him than there are for Robinson for me right now. Josh Jacobs, 6,300 against a somewhat tough defense, but they just pound the rock to him constantly. And he's seen more work in the passing game outside of week 8 where there was a ton of wind. 6,300 does seem too cheap. We're never going to get Ezekiel Elliott at a cheaper price, but I don't know if I can go to it against Pittsburgh. Just too tough for me. Gurley, $5 running back, but do you really want 2.5 yards per carry? He's really got to grind it out and score touchdowns. If he's going to pay off this salary, he's a very touchdown dependent back, at least in the way that he's being utilized by Atlanta this season. So I'm probably not going to want to go this route outside of tournaments, and probably not very much. We saw David Montgomery get a lot of usage around the goal line. We know that Eckler is still going to be out this week, which opens up a little bit of value for us. Melvin Gordon III did not see a lot of work last week. Lindsey was the back who shined, and now that he's back, I talked about this leading up to the season. I was very high on Lindsey in best ball drafts for the reason that I was told that this was going to be basically a 45-45 situation, like a true timeshare, not 65-35 for Melvin Gordon, not 70-30 for Melvin Gordon, but Lindsey was going to get a ton of work. He's been hurt most of the year, but we saw him basically split touches with Melvin Gordon, and I think that kind of cannibalizes both of them in terms of playing them on DraftKings. There's a lot of risk involved, and it's tough if you're only going to get 10 to 15 touches for you to exceed 20 or reach 25 DraftKings points as a starting running back. Same thing goes for Lindsey at 2,200. Got 7 touches yesterday and did score the touchdown in that game. It's a tough situation all around. Same with Le'Veon Bell and CEH. We saw them get both 9 touches in a game where they were crushing their opponent yesterday. I don't know that I can hang my hat on either of them. DJ Dallas had a huge day, but we have to monitor injuries, and Buffalo is not really where we want to attack with running backs, though we do want to attack them with a specific type of receiver, which we'll be getting to in a second. But Justin Jackson did see the lion's share of the rushes for the Los Angeles Chargers last week at Denver. He racked up 20 touches again. Second week in the last 3 that he's done this, and he's 4,900. For me, in the terms of first look, I like Justin Jackson as the best value on the board on Monday. That will probably change by the time the weekend gets here. This is not a lock and load play. This is not something where I feel, you know what? You're locking Justin Jackson. You have to play him on Sunday. First look is more of an exercise, and I think that we can get a home favored running back who projects to get probably around 20 touches, is certainly involved in the passing game, should get some of the inside the 5 carries, if not the majority of the inside the 5 running back carries on his team. He's less than 5K. And the Raiders are a team that we want to stream against all day with running backs. Let's plug a defense in just for the sake of getting one. I don't even care who it is. Fine. People are going to re-at me. It's not going to be them. There. Why did you play defense against the quarterback? Nah. I don't care who the defense is for the purpose of first look. We'll get to the defenses later in the week. We put out a ton of videos on this channel, so don't even sweat the fact that we're not talking about defense yet. We will. Hopkins is fine, but I think he's more of a tournament play, especially when paired with Kyler, right? Like, we know the service that he's getting all season long in terms of targets, but 8,200 plus the 7,800, that's a lot of money to spend on a quarterback combo. You can bring it back with some guys on Miami. I don't know if we're going to bring it back with Gaskin, if we're going to bring it back with one of the pass catchers for tournaments. We may get there by the time Top Stacks gets here on Thursday, so look out for that video. DK Metcalf coming off of a massive week. You guys know how I feel about DK Metcalf. He's amazing. Like, can score touchdowns in bunches, big splash plays, gets ton of end zone receptions, or end zone targets, which is the easiest predictor of touchdowns in terms of wide receivers. He led the league in it last year. He's one of the league leaders through the first half of the season this year. But Buffalo is tougher on the perimeter, even though they've had injuries there to Tre'Davious White and Josh Norman. You can say, Norman's not good, whatever. I don't care. He's still tougher than a replaceable cornerback, and when he's guarding your secondary receiver on the outside, that's another thing. But neither of them traveled to the slot. Buffalo hasn't been good at defending slot receivers, and Russ has been cooking. So who plays the slot? Oh yeah, this dude. Kind of feels like a Lockett week. At least early. You know that you're buying into a little bit of risk anytime that you target Tyler Lockett, because he might only end up with 5 targets. 5, 4, 8, 13, 20. Arizona struggles against slot receivers. Dallas struggles against every receiver. I kind of want to go after them on weeks where there's guys on the outside that can make him the path of least resistance. Russ Wilson definitely knows that he has 2 wide receiver ones on his team, and most teams are not equipped. Pretty much any team is not equipped to take both away. So he's going to the place that has less resistance. And right now, the way that Buffalo defends, you can beat them up in the slot with slot receivers, whether those are tight ends that line up in the slot or whether those are true slot receivers. That's where Tyler Lockett is playing a lot of his snaps, which leads me down the path of, for 1,000 less, I get a top-notch primetime receiver with big-time upside And I'm willing to take the risk a little bit on the floor because I think that his floor is higher this week. I think we're going to see more in the range of 8 to 10 targets as opposed to 4 or 5. So that's my process here for first look to go towards Lockett. Now, if you said, you know what, I don't believe you, and I would rather go with Keenan Allen in this spot, I'm not going to fault you. Keenan Allen's been absolutely fantastic. We've talked about this. Double-digit targets in every game that he did not leave in the first quarter with injury since Herbert took over the job. They finally priced him up, sort of, to 7K. So we understand the floor and the ceiling. Allen could very easily be the better cash game play. And if that's the route that you want to go with your first look, that's fine with me. I'm just trying to find my ways to get Seattle pass game options into a lot of my lineups with as much efficiency as they've had, with as much volume as they've had, and with as much success as they've had pretty much every single week. If you want to go with Allen over him, I'm fine with that. Looking at a few more receivers I talked to you about already, I like Will Fuller a lot. He to me is in the same basket in week 9 that Tyler Lockett is in week 9. Marquise Brown, boomer bust. Chase Claypool against Dallas. He's our if-then statement. If Deontay Johnson, who got injured again last week, if this dude could stay healthy, Deontay Johnson would just be an absolute smash play, but he's been in and out of every single game. If Deontay Johnson is out, then Chase Claypool is he's one of the dudes this week because we're just going to stream guys against Dallas, looking for ways to play anybody we can, Connor included, James Washington if Johnson is out, Juju Smith-Schuster, Eric Ebron, who's one of the top tight ends on metrics as far as the league is concerned for fantasy. I made a tweet about that this morning with all the guys that are running routes per drop back, and he's on that list and performing really well so far this year. So we have to kind of wait and see on Deontay Johnson, and here is Deontay Johnson at 5K. If Deontay Johnson is in and you want to risk him not leaving a game with injury, then Deontay Johnson at 5K has this sort of upside: 15 targets, 13 targets, 10 targets. The 3 games that he's stayed healthy this year, he has piled up 38 targets in 3 games and is averaging what? 22 DraftKings points a game for 5K. It's just a matter of health right now with Deontay. We have to look cheaper to make this lineup work. We have an average of 4K remaining per player. CD Lamb at 4,900. Jerry Jeudy led the league in air yards last week against Atlanta, who struggled pretty much against everything. If you want to take that look, I'm fine with it. LaVisca at 42, crowd favorite. Hunter Renfrow, our fall guy. Michael Gallup is way down at 4K. He had 12 targets last week. This may be something that we need to monitor. With the change in quarterbacks, you're going to see things a little bit differently, right? Different quarterbacks view their pass catchers differently. So while Dak was only using Gallup as a 9 runner, they're not running him on all those types of routes anymore because they don't have quarterbacks and get it there. You know, Danucci's Italian Restaurant is just not able to get the ball 50 yards through the air down the field to Michael Gallup, and the offensive line isn't protecting him as much, so he's got to get closer to the line of scrimmage, which makes Gallup a little bit more in play for me, at least at 4K. But this kid can play. At 3,900, he's had consistent usage in the passing game. He has definite downfield ability against a team that funnels, it's a defensive funnel towards passing games. So if Chicago is going to keep pace in this game, and as much as Allen Robinson's going to dictate getting double covered everywhere, Darnell Mooney is going to draw man-to-man coverage, is going to have an advantage on certain plays, and it's just a matter of, can Foles feed him the ball where he can win? And we've started to see that kind of happen the last few weeks with 23 targets over the last 4 games. The target usage is great. And I like the fact that he's got a good matchup this week and is only 3,900, and more value will pop at wide receiver as the week goes on. Moving on to tight end, Darren Waller's still too cheap at 5,800. And again, this is a great spot. Ruggs is the guy who unlocks Waller, at least from where I'm sitting. The more downfield, the more vertical that the Raiders can get with Ruggs in the lineup, the more that opens up Darren Waller on those 10-yard and down air yard throws, those low A-dot throws. Last week, that really was not that much of a possibility because the high winds, 40-mile-per-hour winds in Cleveland, were keeping them from unlocking Ruggs. Now that Ruggs should theoretically be back in play in Los Angeles in week 9, Darren Waller, for the game log watchers, might be somebody that they're going to ignore. We could get him at a lower percentage than most weeks. Travis Kelce is in play pretty much every single week. Mark Andrews, if you're playing stacks, fine, but Indy is very tough against tight ends. Eric Ebron against Dallas, I believe is in play this week at 4,500, but he is a tournament play for me at the price that he's at. Evan Ingram, he's damn near redacted, but we'll find out on Monday night if they actually use him in a better way than they've used him before. Hayden Hurst Helmsley, been solid the last 3 weeks. We were told that he was terrible. Remember this? He was terrible early in the year. I don't care how many routes he runs. I don't care how many dropbacks. I don't care how many targets he gets. He's terrible. He's not performing. The underlying stats will always dictate whether that performance is coming. And Hayden Hurst has definitely had the volume to sustain the amount of fantasy points that he has started putting up the last 3 weeks. 1 touchdown in the last 3 weeks, no game under 10 fantasy points on DraftKings. We're going to come down a little bit more. If you wanted to come down on defense, you can to try and get up to somebody like Ebron. We're going to look at a little bit lower price guys. Thomas is touchdown dependent. He's running a ton of routes. He's not getting a lot of targets. He's definitely not getting a ton of air yards, but he is getting great service in the red zone and in the end zone. He is a touchdown dependent option at 3,700. He is boom or bust. He's not going to get 10 targets a game. That's just not how they're utilizing him, but he is at least out in the route and he's definitely out in the route when they get close to the goal line. So I'm not against Thomas this week. I know we have the redacted shirt and all that. And Trey Burton is another one as well against this matchup. He's running a good amount of routes. They're utilizing him around the goal line in very creative ways, lining him up as the Wildcat. They're running him on jet sweeps around the goal line. So like his touchdown equity for a tight end is actually elevated from where some other tight ends are. But as I said before, it's either Hunter Henry, if you want to go with that at 4K, or it's Hurst. I'm going to go with Hurst going up against Denver here. That fills out our lineup. Watson, Cook, Robinson, Cooks. Got the 2 Cooks lineup here. We're going to watch Russ Cook with Lockett, Mooney, Hurst, Jackson, Falcons D. Hope that this week treats you guys well. Hope that you did well last weekend. Not as well as our Millionaire Maker winner, but hope you did well. Look out for another video right here.
He's a legend.